History has always carried shadows of fear, but some punishments go beyond anything the human mind can easily imagine. Across centuries, rulers and inquisitors devised ways of inflicting such dreadful torment that death itself felt like mercy. These were not ordinary punishments meant to correct a mistake. They were slow, painful, and deeply humiliating experiences designed to break both the body and the soul. Imagine being locked in a cage too small to move, left to rot in front of strangers, or having your bones shattered one by one as a crowd cheered. When we think of a coffin today, the image is one of final rest, a quiet place where the dead lie in peace. But in medieval Europe, the coffin became something far more terrifying. It was transformed into an instrument of torture, a nightmare made real known as the Coffin Torture. Unlike a quick death on the battlefield or even a hanging, the Coffin Torture was not about speed. It was about dragging the process out for as long as possible. Victims were forced inside tight iron or wooden cages shaped like coffins. They could barely sit or stand, and every movement was uncomfortable. These cages were not kept indoors. Instead, they were hung in open places, exposed to sun, rain, and biting cold. The condemned became a public display, left for anyone to witness. And the torture wasn't just physical. It was psychological. Every passing hour without food, without water, without hope, made the suffering worse. The human body weakened, but the mind had to endure the horror of waiting for the inevitable. And if the weather didn't break them, nature itself would. Rats would crawl near, crows would circle above, and vultures would peck at living flesh. Imagine being fully conscious while wild animals begin to feast on your body, knowing you are powerless to stop them. The victim wasn't simply punished. They were degraded, displayed as a warning. The coffin became a stage where human suffering was turned into a spectacle. This punishment was reserved for those who had committed crimes considered unforgivable: heretics, traitors, blasphemers. The Spanish Inquisition, infamous for its cruelty, used the coffin torture to make examples out of the accused. A body rotting in a cage was not just an execution, it was propaganda. The message was unmistakable: defy the church or the crown and this will be your fate. But the coffin torture was only one of the many nightmares of medieval Europe. Another infamous punishment was the breaking wheel, also known as the Catherine wheel. This device wasn't just about killing. It was about destroying someone piece by piece in the most public way possible. The condemned would be tied to a large wooden wheel, their arms and legs stretched out. Then the executioner, armed with a heavy iron club, would begin smashing the victim's bones. The strikes were deliberate, paced, and cruel. First the arms, then the legs, sometimes even the spine, each blow shattering bone and sending shockwaves of pain through the body. But here's the most terrifying part. Death did not always come quickly. Many victims survived for hours or even days in this broken state. Their mangled bodies were often left tied to the wheel, displayed for all to see. Travelers passing by would witness the horror. Parents would cover their children's eyes, and yet the authorities wanted this fear. It was theater, a brutal, bloody theater. The breaking wheel broke not only bones but spirits, both of the condemned and of those who dared to imagine disobedience. One of the most well-known cases occurred in the 16th century. A German criminal named Peter N. was executed on the wheel for his terrible crimes. But while his deeds were monstrous, the punishment itself was equally horrifying. His body was shattered, his suffering prolonged, and his corpse displayed as a message: no crime goes unpunished, and no mercy will be shown. If the breaking wheel was about slow destruction, another medieval execution method was about fiery terror. Known as the Boiling Cauldron, this punishment remains one of the most gruesome ever recorded. The very idea of being boiled alive is enough to make anyone shiver, and yet for centuries, this was considered a just form of punishment for certain crimes. The process was horrifyingly simple. The condemned was bound, so there was no chance of escape. A massive cauldron, filled with boiling water, oil, or sometimes even molten substances, stood waiting. Then, in front of a gathered crowd, the victim was slowly lowered into the boiling liquid. The pain would have been indescribable. The moment skin touched the liquid, it blistered and burned. Muscles tore apart, nerves screamed, and the body convulsed violently against the restraints. But instead of a quick end, the process was drawn out. Some accounts describe victims being dipped in slowly, inch by inch. so the crowd could hear their screams and watch their flesh blister before the final plunge. This wasn't just execution, it was spectacle. It was meant to terrify, to leave an unforgettable memory in the minds of all who watched. Rulers and inquisitors believed that by turning executions into such horrific public displays, they could prevent others from committing crimes or opposing authority. One of the most chilling examples was the execution of Agnes Waterhouse, accused of witchcraft in 1566. She was sentenced to be boiled alive, not only as punishment, but as a warning during the witch hunts. The crowd gathered to watch her suffer, her screams echoing as the boiling cauldron consumed her. For the authorities, this was justice. For the victim, it was pure hell. What makes the boiling cauldron so frightening is not just the pain, but the anticipation. Imagine standing above the bubbling liquid, hearing it hiss and pop, knowing that in moments your body would be lowered in piece by piece. The psychological torment was just as cruel as the physical agony. Looking back, it's hard to comprehend how such punishments were ever considered acceptable. But in the medieval mindset, punishment was not only about justice. It was about fear, control, and power. By making punishments public, rulers ensured that their authority would never be questioned. By making them slow and painful, they reinforced the idea that crime, or defiance, would not only cost you your life, but also your dignity, your hope, and your humanity. The Coffin Torture, the breaking wheel, and the boiling cauldron each reveal something chilling about the world that created them. These were societies built not just on law, but on the fear of punishment. In an age without mass media, without newspapers or social networks, executions became the ultimate form of communication. Every scream, every broken bone, every blistered body carried a message. This is what happens when you disobey. It's easy to dismiss these tortures as relics of a cruel past, but they remind us of something deeper about human history. Power has often been maintained through fear. And when fear becomes the tool of rulers, cruelty often follows. The suffering of those locked in coffins, shattered on wheels, or boiled alive was more than punishment. It was theater of horror, written into history not with ink but with blood and screams. Today we might look back in disbelief, but these punishments were very real. They shaped entire generations, silencing rebellion and instilling obedience. And while the devices themselves have long been abandoned, the lesson remains. History is not always written by kings and conquerors. Sometimes it is carved into memory by the agony of the broken. So next time you think of medieval history, remember this. Behind the castles and knights, behind the kings and their crowns, there were cages swinging in the wind, wheels stained with blood, and cauldrons boiling with human screams. A world where death was not the greatest fear, but where living long enough to suffer was the true punishment.